before I left sat me down. She's like, you know, when two people live together, things can happen. And obviously she's like,
things can happen.
It is like, she didn't obviously, yeah, she's not like saying it directly, but you know what she's like implying. And I remember all I responded with was like, you know, things can happen like without moving in together.
Yeah.
And in that moment I was like, did I just fucking say that to my mom? Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Homali, and I'm basically like your internet big sis. I share advice, tell you stories, and talk about all the things that nobody wants to talk about. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to be doing a get ready with me, but I do have a very special guest.
Hi,
we have Neeti here. If you haven't checked out her YouTube channel, definitely check it out. She does a lot of content around self-development and confidence and just being a brown girl and like brown girl problems. So I think you would really enjoy her content. I'll leave her link in the description below. So I put up a poll on my Instagram stories asking you guys what you wanted us to talk about, and the thing that you guys voted the most for was moving out before marriage. And I thought that would be a great topic for us to discuss because we moved out at very different times in our lives. You moved out when you were 18.
Yeah.
Well, you went to university and just like never
went back.
Yeah, you never moved back in with your parents. Yeah. I also moved out when I was 18 for university, but it was a bit different because I ended up moving back home. And I also feel like when you move out for university, you're not necessarily hit with like full adulthood at that point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess for both of us, you moved out technically, if we're not counting university, right after university. Yeah. And for me, I moved out when I was around 27-ish, like 26, 27. Mm-hmm. I was engaged and I moved out with my now husband, but then fiance. We thought it'd be fun to kind of share different perspectives of what it's like living alone, and also like, is it worth kind of moving out before marriage? Because I think this is a hot topic.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like, you know, as a brown girl, it's a big no-no for us to move out before we get married.
Even if you're engaged.
Yeah. Especially, it's a huge no-no especially if you're moving in with a boy.
Oh God.
God forbid.
Oh my
God. Shame. So yeah, I thought we would kind of get into that topic and help you guys navigate that situation if that is something you really want to do. Let's kind of dive right into it. Yeah. I just want to ask you, what made you want to move out?
Okay, so I had a little bit of a different experience.
Yeah.
I think as a kid I was really sheltered. And my parents had actually lived on residence for their university experience.
Oh, okay.
So it was a little bit different in the sense that my dad was like, absolutely not, like stay home, but my mom was a little bit like, you know, like maybe, yeah, and not because of like partying and stuff, but because she was just like the growth, and she's like, I think you'll learn how to clean, do laundry, like you don't do shit in the house.
Not the cleaning. Force you into domestication.
They're like, no one's gonna pick up after you, maybe you should go learn. And so they were very like, go to university and like live on res. And also I only moved 30 minutes away for res.
Hold on, pause. Did you end up becoming more domesticated?
I think so.
Or are you still like messy? And,
I'm still messy as fuck, as you can see, but like, yeah. Like she was like, girl, like when are you gonna learn? And then she's like,
my parents are like, no one's gonna marry you. If you don't pick up after yourself. They're just like, you don't know how to cook, you don't know how to clean. I mean, I knew how to clean, I just didn't do it.
Yeah. No, same. I can't clean if I have to.
So your mom basically was like, domesticate this
she's like, you should go.
Yeah.
But I think what my parents expected is after my 4 years are done, I should be moving home. Like that's what every other kid does.
Yes.
And I think that once I had got a taste of moving out, living on my own, I also moved to downtown Toronto, so there's like a lot going on.
Yeah.
City life. Like it wasn't like I moved to like butt fuck nowhere. I was like, I don't want to give this up. I can't give this up. Absolutely not. And so I feel like that's more where my problems came when it comes to like convincing my parents than like undergrad.
I had a very similar experience. The thing with me though, when I moved away to university, I would come home every weekend to work. So I think my parents just like got used to me being home, and they, I don't know, they saw me often enough. I guess I got my first true experience of freedom when I moved away for university, and then moving back was like the hardest thing ever, because you were saying your parents call you all the time, but for me, my parents weren't really like that. Like once I was gone, they were just like, okay, whatever, she's doing her own thing. But as soon as I came back, they were like always on my case, and they were always like, where are you? What are you doing? Like, where are you going? Who are you going with? Like 1,001 questions. And that was really hard for me to adjust back to, because it's not like they were like that when I lived away.
You're saying you went home one weekend, so I don't know what you were like in university, but was it like the freedom that you missed? Was it just...
Yeah, it was just like, I wasn't a very like crazy kid. Like, I didn't drink a lot. I didn't party a lot. Like, I did, but, like, not to, like, the extent that most, I think, kids my age would have. I felt like I was just at, like, peace. I think I lived in one of those houses that when one person's, like, mood is affected, it affects everyone in the house. There was a level of peace that I felt of just, like, being able to, like, be on my own, have my own space.
I think what it is, it's, like, you have autonomy.
Yeah.
Over what your mood, what you do. Like,
exactly. And it wasn't, like, if I wanted to go out and, like, get pizza at 10 o'clock at night, there wouldn't be any questions about
like,
it.
why are you eating pizza?
Exactly, exactly. Like, there wouldn't be any questions. So it's not like I was, like, doing all this wild shit with my freedom. It's just like, it was nice to be able to make my own decisions whenever I wanted. And then moving back, it's like all of that is, like, taken away from you, and that was really hard to
adjust.
Adjust into that reality. When I was 26, 27-ish, I got engaged to my now husband, and then we decided to move out. We we were engaged already. We had already planned out our wedding date and stuff. We moved out in September 2019, and our wedding was April 2020.
I think I heard you talk about this before. What was the reasoning for why you didn't want to wait till April?
So the house that we moved into, my husband had actually bought it as, like, an investment property. He had a tenant in it, and their lease was coming up. And so, like, if we wanted to, like, get them out of the house, and we wanted to move in, then we'd have to move in September of 2019. Otherwise, we'd have to wait another year.
And you would have already been married for, like,
I would have been,
months.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, I'm not trying to live with your parents. I don't want to live with my parents. So it's like, let's just move.
Yeah.
And obviously that caused
ruckus.
Drama.
Yeah.
But it was like...
How did you tell them?
I actually told them a year in advance. So...
Oh, wow.
I gave them a full year.
Before you were engaged?
Before I was engaged.
Oh.
Yeah. So...
That's even wilder.
Yeah, so I feel like I had introduced Vikra to them in 2018. And then October of 2018, at that point, I had just, like, gone through a lot of health stuff. I was just not in a good place with my parents. And I knew I needed to leave. And so in 2018, I had started this conversation with them of, like, hey, I think I'm going to buy my own condo or, like, apartment. At that point, too, I'm also, like, it would be good for me to invest in something like that. I had that conversation with them. I remember I took them to, like, McDonald's. And I bought them a sundae or, like, fries or something.
Here's your treat. Yeah. Let me just drop a bomb
I'm like,
on
let
you.
me drop a bomb on you, but here's a little treat from me. And I was just like, you know, I'm thinking of moving out. Also, at this point, like, my influencer career had kind of taken off, too. And so I was getting so much PR. My room was so small. It was really hard for me to work out of it. That's kind of how I told them, like, look, I need to buy a condo. I need to buy something to have more space to work. And my parents weren't really happy about it at first. Or at all, but I think they knew it was one of those situations where they're just like, this bitch is gonna do it anyways. Like,
so you didn't mention your boyfriend at all in this.
So I kind of did. That was like, so they were like, we don't want you living on your own, it's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, but what if Vikra lived with me? And that's kind of how I brought it in, because like they brought up not living on
Yeah.
And I was like, but what
smart.
if Vikra?
You're smart.
But then like it didn't really go further into the conversation. And then at one point my dad kind of started helping me find condos. Like he was like showing me listings and stuff. So I was like, okay, they're like
okay with it.
They're okay with it, right? Eventually, I think after a couple of months, Vikra was like, maybe we should just move into the house we already have. And I was like, okay. And then I broke that news to my parents. And again, they were like, okay. But I don't think they actually thought I was going to do it. I don't know. Are your parents like that? Where you're like, you tell them they're going to do something and they think you're bluffing? And
really? No. Mine are like, oh, she's going to do it.
No, my parents always think I'm bluffing for some reason. I was like, when have I ever bluffed in my entire life?
Like, don't you know me?
Like, anyways, some time had passed. We didn't really talk about it. I just assumed they were okay with it because I had told them, like, bro, I give you a year to like process this information.
Actually, it's a
long time, right? And then I told them that like we were moving out in September because that's when we were getting the house. And then I started doing like renos on the house. And my dad was like involved in it because like my dad works in like the flooring industry. So I'm like asking him for his contacts and like whatever. So we did all these like renos on the house. And then when I was like maybe a month out from moving out, my parents were like, oh, you're like, you didn't tell us you're moving out. I was like,
why was they
what?
renovating this house then?
That's what I said. He thought like I was just gonna work out of there in the meantime, and then when I got married, then we were gonna move into that house. And I was like, why would I put in all this money?
Yeah.
And also like, why would I drive back and forth when I can just set up a bedroom there? Like, why would I do any of that?
You think someone said something to him? Like, do you
No, I think they just didn't want to...
Didn't clue into it.
No, I think they clued into it. It's like one of those things where they just did not have the language to express their feelings in the moment, so they just hoped it wasn't going to happen. I think that goes with, like, the whole bluffing thing, too, right? Like, I think they just thought, like, I wouldn't go through with it.
Yeah.
And they didn't know how to, like, bring it up or talk to me about it or anything like that. And then when it actually happens, that's when they get upset because they realize it's actually, like, happening.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe they didn't process it. I feel like that's kind of what happened.
That's why I was thinking maybe someone said something. Because I know when my parents switch up like that, I think it's because somebody made a comment.
I feel like for them, it was more so, like, realizing it's actually happening.
Yeah, okay.
Like,
yeah,
they're, like, cluing in, like, oh my god, this is actually happening, and, like, this is not something we mentally prepared for. Like, their tactic was to, like, guilt trip me out of it. And their concerns were obviously, like, you know, what are people going to say? I definitely think one of the bigger concerns was, like, me being pregnant before marriage. Because,
oh, really?
Because my mom said something. She sat me down one time. This was, like, the weirdest conversation.
I hate these conversations.
So, like, before I left, sat me down, and she's like, you know, when two people live together, things can happen. And obviously she's like...
Things can happen.
It is like, she didn't obviously... Yeah, she's not, like, saying it directly, but you know what she's, like, implying. And I remember all I responded with was, like, you know, things can happen, like, without moving in together.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, did I just fucking say that to my mom? I'm like, that's so weird.
That's not helping.
I know, it's really not.
helping.
It's really not. But I was like, what do you want me to do at this point? I feel like I'm also, like, a grown adult. Like, I'm, like, 26, 20. I'm about to get married to this man. So we moved out. And then COVID happened. So our wedding didn't actually happen.
Oh.
We lived together for about a year and a half before we officially...
So you got married in COVID?
Yeah, like 2021.
Okay.
So, like, after the first major year of COVID.
Did you feel like you were also waiting to get married, or did you feel like it was pressured a little bit because you guys were living together?
You know what's really bad? So I think a big reason I wanted to get married was because I wanted to leave the house.
That is a very, side note, but that's a very common thing in our culture.
And looking back at it, I wish that wasn't the case. Like, and I think that's something I warn girls about all the time. Like, please do not get married just to leave the house. I feel like it worked out for me, but, like, oftentimes it doesn't work out for a lot of people.
And I think it puts unnecessary pressure
on
the marriage. And this is a man that you actually love. Like,
yeah.
You don't want to put that pressure, and, like, you're putting this huge sense of freedom. You're also withholding, I feel like, a little bit of your life.
100%, and, like, you might end up making a rash judgment to marry someone because you're so desperate to move out.
Yeah.
And that person may not actually be the person you want to marry or see fit, especially at a young age when you're still learning about yourself. And for me, like, the person I was at 23, 24, even 25 when I got engaged, to the person I was, like, when I got married and a little after we got married, like, after we lived together, I was so different. After moving out is when I started therapy, when I started reading a lot of, like, these self-help books, and growing as a person and understanding what I wanted in a relationship. And, like, thankfully I had a husband that was willing to grow with me, but there's a lot of cases where that doesn't happen. You just end up outgrowing the person, and you realize that you've married this person for the wrong reasons. And
for freedom.
Yeah, for freedom. And another thing that's really scary is, like, sometimes you think you're getting that freedom. Again, this didn't happen in my case, but I know a lot of people that this has happened to, where they think they're marrying to get their freedom, and then they just find themselves in another toxic situation.
Because their husband may not be.
Exactly. Or, like, you know, their family may not be, like, and it might be different types of toxic, oftentimes because you haven't healed or you don't know enough about yourself and what you want in a relationship. You find yourself in the same situation that that was at home, because that's what you know, that's what you attract, right? And so I highly suggest, you know, moving out by yourself before getting married, or not getting married just to move out, because I feel like that's not going to lead to anything.
No, and I actually think it'll ruin your relationship. Like,
yeah,
not in all cases, but I think that it can really have an impact on your relationship.
It definitely does. I'm just such a different person than what I was before.
Yeah.
And I think that happens for a lot of women, especially when they hit their, like, 30s. You're just, like, the things you want, what you look for in a partner, like, who you become is just very, very different than when you were, like, 20. Especially if you're someone that's, like, very much into like self-development, growth, all that stuff, right?
Something you said how moving out you really started reading all these self-help books, you started going to therapy. That is what I feel. So obviously I moved out by myself, like not with a man, so it was a little bit different because that is also taboo. Girls living alone. I live in a city, and so that's, you know, safety.
Shit, you're a whore. No.
No, but also like the concern is like, what if you're bringing guys back? Like that's 100%. No one's saying it to me, but I know what they're thinking. Like she has all the freedom in the world. There could be like guys rotating here, you know, which is like, it's funny because I'm sure a lot of you guys and me, like, that's not at all why you want to move. No, 100%. It's not the case at all. But it's also like, that's not like the main reason. But like, I actually remember, this just reminded me, there was a girl from Brampton. And she's like a friend of a friend, and she follows me like on social media, but we kind of became friends. And she said to me, she was like, the way, and she had been out with me like many times, she'd see my demeanor, and she'd be like, you know how many, like, she's like, the respect I have for you, because like you literally have your own place in the city, but you're so like not a whore. Like, that's basically what she was saying to me. She was like, you don't understand, like, if the girls in Brampton are like, not just specifically Brampton, but the girls would be wilding out.
I did notice that happen a lot, especially when I went away to university. Like, I knew a lot of girls in high school that were like, you know, prim and proper, and like, and then they just and then they like, because they got the first taste of freedom, like they just like wilded out. They just like wanted to experience life because they had been so like constrained before.
And I do get it. Because I had friends like that in high school. Even I feel like I did wild out a little bit. Like, right when I got the freedom. When I look back, I'm like, you should care a lot about how you are carrying yourself as well. And I'm like, that's not a good look, but that's also not something maybe you're going to realize until you're a little older.
I think it's like, there's like a difference between just trying to experience freedom and stuff that aligns with your soul. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes, like, there's nothing wrong with dating or living on your own or whatever it is, but as long as you're doing it with good intentions and you're doing it because it's something that actually resonates with you. It's not because you're looking for some type of outside validation. It's not because you're trying to get people to like you. Let's say even like sleeping with someone, right? It's like, you're single, you could be sleeping with someone. If you actually feel aligned with that person and you think it's like good in that moment, then why not? Versus like just going around sleeping with anyone and like, because you can exactly. You have to really ask yourself, like, will I feel good about myself at the end of the day? And you have to understand, like, dig deeper of like, is this coming from shame? Is this coming from like actual desire or validation or whatever? Or is this coming because like, this is someone I actually align with and I feel good about this decision that I'm making, you know? And I think for some people, because they don't have that freedom, they can't fathom why someone would choose not to take advantage of that freedom, or I guess like just do absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the kind of comments I get. I think one thing I will say is like, so obviously it wasn't really the freedom part that kept me living by myself. It was, I feel like I just noticed like the growth that I was getting, and like also like, everyone's home is different, but I felt like mine was still a bit of a toxic environment. And I just felt like going from like having peace to that, like I was like, I don't know if I want to be in that anymore.
That was me as well.
Like, it's not even about like, oh, I want to like have freedom, because my parents were never like strict to the point of like, you can't go out, you can't do this. Like, they were like, you could still go on the weekend to Toronto.
That's interesting. My parents weren't like that. They hated when I went out, and
I mean, they wouldn't want to see me, like, they've actually never seen me come home drunk, like, because I've never had to do that.
I've never came home drunk either. That's the thing I never really understood about my parents. It was like, I never really did anything crazy.
So you're like, why?
Yeah, like, why are you so scared about, like, what I'm going to be doing? Like, I was never really that girl to begin with.
Sometimes I'm like, if only they knew what people were doing.
100%.
Sometimes I'm like, you should, like, I wish you could walk into, like, go into a university frat house.
100%.
And then look at me, and then you're gonna be like...
And I feel like there's nothing wrong with doing those things, but it's like, if you're worrying for the worst, like, I'm not it. Like, I'm not that person, you know? Like, I think you should enjoy those things when you are young. It's an experience. It's, like, part of growing up. It's a part of, like, discovering yourself. I did do some of that. It's just, like, not something I fully enjoyed. Do you get what I mean? It's just, like, it wasn't really in my personality or something that I, like, super gravitated towards.
And you probably felt like, I wish you could see that.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I'm like, I just don't really know what you're worrying about at this point.
It's like, it's like worst case.
Exactly. So that was, it was interesting. But I'm happy I did like really pushed to move out before I ended up getting married.
Is there a part of you that wishes you moved out
by myself before I got married? 100%.
Now that you're married, like, do you feel like you never really had your own space?
It's not that I didn't have my own space. I don't think that's like that was ever the issue, or why I would want to be by myself moved out. I think it's more so just like you're saying, like the personal growth.
Yeah.
Like you just turn into a different person when you are by yourself, when you have your peace, when you know what you really want. And again, I can't stress this enough. I feel like I'm so lucky that my husband grew with me. I don't think that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say,
you know,
you're reading these books and you're starting therapy, but you're also in a newer, not new relationship, but a whole
but
new,
but like living with someone is so different than dating them. And I think also with my husband, it's like he was playing catch up with me, so that was hard, right? Because I was the one that went to therapy first. I was the one that was reading these books first, and so like, you know, he also grew up in a very like traditional household too, right? And so breaking free from these like toxic cycles and like toxic mentalities, like it takes time, and it's like stuff you have to kind of discover on your own. You can't like have someone say it to you and it just clicks and everything's okay and you change as a person, right? Like that stuff really takes time for you to like process and break free from and like integrate into your life. And so I felt like I was developing, and then I had to like try to like bring him along with me, because that's where we were seeing the conflict. And I think had I had lived on my own, I wouldn't have had as much resistance with growing, because I think there was like a disconnect between me and him.
Like, would you talk about a subject, let's say with your parents, and maybe he would have a different view?
Yeah, not even with my parents, with him, right? Like sometimes I would talk to him about stuff, and like we would have differing opinions, because he's still operating from that survival mentality, and I'm like slowly starting to break free from them, so I have like a different worldview, right? And again, it was like it took me some time to like get him to like think about these things, especially because like a lot of the self-growth comes from being honest with what your upbringing was like, which means you are being honest with what your parents were like. And when you have so much love for your parents, you feel this sense of like protectiveness. Like you don't want to see them as bad people, and they're not bad people, but like, you know, you feel like when you say, hey, they did this wrong, or this wasn't good, or this made me feel XYZ, that was like a negative emotion.
It's because we're taught not to speak about our parents like that.
Exactly.
And it's almost, I felt like a sense of guilt almost.
Exactly. Like you feel guilty, you feel ashamed, you feel like, oh my God, I'm a bad person for viewing my parents this way when they've done so much for me. And it's like, even trying to get him to like understand those things, it's like, you're not a bad person, your parents aren't bad people. It's just that, but there are things that you grew up with that aren't healthy and that aren't helpful, and you have these coping mechanisms that aren't serving you, you know? And you know, even for me, like figuring those things out, it was like, it's like an epiphany. You're like, what the fuck is going on? You know?
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think if I had this space to kind of do that on my own, it would have been a little bit of an easier process. But when you're in a relationship, relationships bring out, can bring out the worst in you, because it can be digging at certain wounds that aren't healed, right? And so it is a little bit harder to heal in that situation, because especially if your partner hasn't started the work yet, there can be a lot of things that are triggering within the relationship. You know what I mean? And that's what was happening to me. There was a lot of things that he said and did that were triggering, because it reminded me of like the environment I lived in at home. And again, it wasn't like he was a bad person or he had ill intentions, but it was just coming from a place of like conditioning. And you know, as he developed in his healing journey, like, I love living, like, it's amazing, you know what I mean? Like, it's like such a beautiful thing, and I couldn't imagine it any other way. But I wish I kind of had learned that for myself before diving into like moving in with him. And I feel like I wish he got the space and energy to like be able to do that on his own too, at his pace, without me being like, you have to make this work because otherwise this isn't going to work, and like we're going to be bickering with each other all the time. Do you get what I mean?
I see what you're saying by playing catch up now.
Yeah. When you started doing like a lot of therapy and like self-development and stuff, were there just people in your life, like for example friends, where you're just like, I'm outgrowing them? Like it's too hard for me to have a conversation with you, or it's too hard for me to share my perspective because you don't have that understanding. yet, you know.
That's what
you're just like on different pages.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening in our relationship, because I'm doing all this work, reading all these things, going to therapy, and he's not doing the same. And so we were just starting to become on different pages, and that's where like the catch up kind of came in, because I'm like, you have to do this work, or otherwise like I feel like I'm going to start to outgrow you. And I don't want that to happen, because I think he's an amazing person, and I think he had so much potential, and I just like wanted, not even just for myself, I wanted it for him, right? Because like, you know, sometimes you heal and then you see the people you love hurting, like you can see it from a different perspective.
Like, if only you could understand.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, I see where your anxiety is coming from, I see why you act this way in these scenarios, or you get what, you know what I mean? And I'm like, it doesn't need to be that way, because I'm like, oh, I was there too, and I'm not living like that anymore, and it's so much better over here, and I wish you just like came. And I think that's like, you know, all those things were like happening within the first couple of years of us being married. I wish like I had gotten to live on my own and gotten to go through that healing journey without having to like drag him into it, to make sure everything worked. I wish he got to kind of just like, I also wish he got to live on his own and got to do that self-discovery on his own in like his own space and his own peace, rather than us being like, you need to be better at this, you need to be better, I need to work on this, I need to, you know what I mean?
A lot of girls, they would take like whatever you have in your childhood, whatever trauma you've been through, there's probably a sense of void maybe that you have. Maybe it's like a void of validation, or maybe it's just like wanting to be appreciated. And the fact that you were doing this self-development, going to therapy, maybe you were working on those things while you were in a relationship is really big, because a lot of people would just fill that void with the partner. And I've seen that happen so many times, especially because you went directly from home to living with him.
I thought it was going to be amazing. I thought it was like, my problems are solved when I'm like leaving.
And it's almost like you have this man and you're in love with him, and you're like, I'm loved now. So like whatever trauma I have of not being loved, it's gone.
It's almost like running away from your problems, and you don't realize a lot of that stuff lives in you. Like when we moved out, first of all, growing up, I was like, I'm never gonna be like my parents. Blah, blah, blah. I woke up and I was like, oh my fucking god, I'm exactly like my parents.
Like what, like bickering?
Not just a bickering, like just my personality. It had nothing to do with him. Like I think like just who I was, how I operated, I could see so much of my parents, and it wasn't always a bad thing. Like there was good parts of it too. There was a lot of great like qualities that I inherited from my parents, but then there was also a lot of qualities that were great but used in the wrong scenarios. And I started like realizing that, and then I also started noticing that in him as well, with his qualities from his parents, right? There was like a lot of great ones, and then there was ones that just like weren't serving him, you know, or like they had good intentions, executed the wrong way. Individually I saw that with us, and then I saw it together, and I saw our parent, like a mix, like a weird mix of our parents' relationships playing out, and I was like, oh my god, like this is, again, like once you start doing that healing like work and understanding yourself and understanding your emotions, it's so evident. I'm like, we're replaying our parents' relationship in just like same shit, different like scenario, you know, like, and it's hard to catch in the moment because it doesn't, you know.
But you're very self-aware
now.
There are people though, like, no, but even though you caught onto it when you were living with him, people
after all that work though, like I feel like that's hard to catch on to when you're not doing that work. I think if I wasn't doing that work,
you would have gone like that 20 years.
Exactly. Exactly. I would have just been like, this is my life now. This is like what it is. And
just, have these patterns.
Exactly. And I wasn't ready to take that for myself. I wasn't ready to have that for him either, because I was like, you deserve better than this. I deserve better than this. Our parents didn't work this hard to create like a like stability in this new country for us to have more opportunities, all this stuff, just for us to live in survival mode still.
Side note, I found, I don't know if your parents were like this, but I really found that living on my own really removed my scarcity mindset.
It did the opposite for me. I wouldn't say I took on the mental load of the finances. I think that was more my husband. Naturally, because I think, like, you know, the way you grow up, it's like the man, the provider, blah, blah, blah.
And I mean, he was the one who invested in the property.
Exactly. So I think he dealt with that a little bit more, and then it trickled on to me. But for you, it was opposite.
Well, because mine wasn't even financial. I think it was just like if I had dreams, like literally my fucking vision board's right there. Like I feel like it would be like my parents would just be like, yeah, but that's not realistic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I can, like, it wasn't even financially. Okay, of course, I was more stressed if you're living on your own.
Yeah.
But, like, in terms of, like, I want to quit my job and become a full-time content creator. That's not very feasible in this day and age. I feel like immigrant parents, just in general, like, they're scared, and I totally get it, because in India, like, who the hell can quit their job? Oh, I was...
Well, now they can, but, like, not back then.
Not back then, but I was, like, supposed to get my PhD and become a doctor.
Yeah.
And I was just kidding, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But, like, for them, that's the safe method in life.
Yeah.
And, like, for me to be doing something completely different, like, if I was still in that environment, I feel like I would have let that trickle in, and I might have even, like, done my PhD just for them.
So it was different for me because I did all those things regardless of what they said. Because I think for me, it was so, like, it was such a strong instinct in me that I'm like, no, I have to do this. And it was one of those things where I was like, if I don't do it, it's going to eat at me. And so I did it, and I saw the results. And so to me, it was like, okay, I know I can do things. I think you would have gotten there too if you lived with your parents, but you just didn't live with them long enough to know that. You get what I mean?
But, like,
I feel like that's your personality.
Was there ever a period where, like, let's say you weren't getting return on investment for, like, let's say content in the beginning?
No.
Really? So you were just instantly making money?
I wasn't. Like, I feel like my first year because I didn't start off as a content creator. I started off as a makeup artist. And so my first year, I didn't make a lot of money. Like, I made, like, maybe, like, 17 grand or something like that. But also, like, I wasn't paying for shit. Like, I didn't have a rent to pay or, like, bills to pay or nothing like that. I was living with my parents, right? So, like, I don't think that scarcity mindset, like, came in immediately because I was, like, mooching off my parents.
Yeah. Did they say anything about that?
No. They never said anything about that. My parents were really great with always providing for me in that sense. Like, my basics. Like, they never paid for anything outside of my basics. Like, they were, like, food, water, shelter, like, that they would pay for that. Anything outside of that, they're like, you're on your own. I think if you were in that scenario too, you would have done it anyways. Like, I think that's something you would have reached. It's just that you never got to that stage in your life because you had always just moved out.
See, mine, like, they would be like, if I made 17 grand, they would be like, get a job. This is not feasible. How are you going to buy a house?
It's like, I made 17 grand, but then the thing is, because I worked throughout university, and I worked, like, full-time jobs. I worked, like, there was, like, points where I did co-ops, I did full-time jobs, I worked all the summer, I worked on the weekends, I did my freelance gigs at the same time, so I had so much money saved as well. So I had, like, backup. Like, they couldn't really say anything to me because I'm like, I'm not asking you for any money. Like, I'm doing everything on my own, and if I wanted to, like, move out and rent a place, I could have done that. It's just that, like, I knew my parents wouldn't be happy with that. So, like, I just didn't.
You had a lot of what's the word? There's a word for this.
Self-confidence?
Even, like, reassurance. Like, you just...
Yeah. I think I made enough mistakes in my life and faced enough rejection at that point in my life, like, up until I was, like, 23. I don't think a lot of people do between those ages. I think people are very risk adverse. For me, like, I worked a lot of sales jobs. So, like, I used to do, like, business-to-business sales, meaning, like, I would go into businesses and, like, cold call and just, like, door after door slammed in my face. And so at that point, I was scared of rejection. I was like, you're going to say no to me? Okay, I'll move on to the next. And I think because I had that sales background, it was, like, easy for me to be, like, okay with the rejection or okay with saying no, because I knew eventually there would be a yes. It's just a numbers game at that point. When I went from quitting my corporate job to becoming a full-time makeup artist, I had my dad be like, oh, you should maybe just go part-time, this is not feasible, all this stuff. My manager then was like, if you're gonna do something, do it 100%. Like, don't just half-ass it. So he was actually the reason I quit fully. And I put but him saying, like, you have to put in 100%, that was me being like, okay, I'm gonna put, like, absolutely everything I have into this. And it's like, in my head, it was like, it has to work. There is no other option. There's no plan B. This is it. Like, this is what it is. And I think because I had that mentality, it was gonna happen. And I feel the same for you. Like, I feel like you have that personality.
I do, but see, even when you're saying like this, this is off topic, but I'm like, there is a part of me that, like, for example, I do think, like, I work full-time. I have a full-time job in clinical research. So I'm like, I would love to quit my job. Why the fuck am I working? Like, I'm like, why? But I'm like,
I had the ability to quit too because I was living at home.
I think that's but then I'm like, I could also move home and quit. Like, it's not, like, the end of the world. Like, I'm like, like, if it's not that I am, like, forced, like, my parents are in a different country.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, sometimes I think, like, I'm like, okay, but then I'm like, would it make me work harder if I had literally no other source of income?
Maybe.
That's what I think that. And I'm like, well, I already work, like, pretty hard with content. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, if I'm at, like, 90 right now, like, maybe it'd go, like, up 10%.
So for me, it was like, what are all these opportunities that I was rejecting when I was doing this other job? For me, because I was a makeup artist, I was like, well, there's certain clients I can't take.
Because of timing?
Because of timings. Like for you as a content creator, maybe it's like, well, I can't set up as many meetings. I can't maybe film as often. I can't push out as much content because there's something else taking up space in my life, right? So it's like, yeah, you're working hard. There's no doubt about it. But had you had the extra time, would you be filling it up with doing more work that towards something you love? Do you get what I mean? And that's what it was for me with like makeup. Like it was like there was certain things I'm like I couldn't film as much. I couldn't like, and I found myself burning out, and like I couldn't take care of my health. I couldn't film. I couldn't like do everything at once if this is what I wanted to do.
Makes sense.
But again, I also had that stability of living at home. So that's so different than
the
financial aspect wasn't an issue for me. I could take that risk. And that was one thing I did tell my parents. I was like, look, I'm living at home. I was like, if I'm going to take a risk like this, it's now. Because when else would I do it? Like when I'm married and have bills to pay? Like absolutely not. You can't just like up and be like, you know what? Let's just fuck everything now and see what happens. Like you can't do that. You can't do that when you have kids. You can't like...
It's so funny because I had this conversation with my dad last week, and I literally said like I would love to just film content, and like I'm single, like I'm young, I'm not married, I don't have kids, I don't have like a million expenses.
This is the time.
I would love to quit, and I would love to do content, and I would love to travel. Like my thing is like my job keeps me from traveling, and I would love to like I have friends like in Dubai, like I would love to like be in Dubai for a month, but I can't. And he was like, like I don't like, why is that like the goal? Like, and I said the exact same thing. Like I was like, now is the time. Like I don't have expenses. But I think my dad's like, how could you be like, don't you want to save? Like why is your
But that doesn't mean you can't save. It doesn't mean you can't save. You don't have to be irresponsible. Like I was still saving. You know, there was things that I cut out. Like for me, traveling was a big thing too. So I feel like the money I spent on my luxury was traveling. I don't own expensive luxury bags. I don't own expensive clothes. I didn't buy clothes all the time. I bought makeup because I had to because of my business, but like even then I used what I had. Like there was like I made do with what I had, and I placed importance on what was important, and then I also saved money. So it's not impossible. It's just you have to give up certain things. You might have to give up certain luxuries. Maybe you can't go out as much with your friends because you want to travel more. It's just like what's more important to you.
But I did notice it with my, like when my dad was saying all these things, like I had your mindset of like I'm young once, like even I was thinking like if I had like a partner, how could I just take off like for months at a time? Like you'd have to find the partner for you though. But then I was like this is like the most free I am, and I was trying to tell him that, and he almost like looked at it in a different perspective of like this is the time you should be saving. You know what I'm saying? Like
I get from their perspective too, but like you can be. I mean, if you move back home, you could be.
I could be, yeah.
I don't know if your parents would make you pay rent, but like...
No.
But like...
I feel like, no. Yeah. I don't think a lot of brown people would ever do that, no. I feel like they'd be so happy.
Yeah.
They would like,
but like, that would be you saving.
Yeah.
Like, what bills do you have to pay then?
But even I think if I moved home, like, they would still be like, you can't quit your job. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
I don't think my parents were like thrilled that I quit my job. They weren't supportive of it. It actually made living at home really hard because they were just like, you should get a real job. Like just going on and on about how like I don't have real work,
especially because you got a degree and then became a makeup artist. They probably are feeling like
I was actually getting my degree and working as a makeup artist at the same time, so they already knew this was something I was doing. It's just that they hated that I was doing it full time now. So it's not like they didn't know this path was coming or it was out of left field. It was very much plausible that I was going to go down this path because I was already doing it. I think it was just a concern like, is this sustainable? And I made it work. I feel like when you have a passion for something, you make it work. Like,
are you like a manifester?
Yeah, for me, it's not just manifesting. I am so in tune with my intuition. And I think that is such an underrated skill to have. Like, if you can get in tune with your intuition, it changes the game because there's certain things in life that you can't logically think out. Like, becoming a makeup artist was such an intuition thing. I always loved makeup. I knew I was going to blah, 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 but going into it full time and taking that risk on myself was such an intuition thing. I was like, this feels right. It's something I have to do, and I know if I don't do it, I'm going to regret it. It was a feeling that ate away at me. It was so clear. It was so like in my face. That's not something you can logic your way into. I felt the same way about being an influencer. That was such a huge risk because there was no brown girls in that space at the time.
Brand deals were probably like,
it was
not
like
as...
the brand deals were good. especially for someone, because there's not many brown people in that space at the time, and like diversity started to become a thing, so I was like,
perfect timing.
yeah. But it was still a risk because I didn't know who to go to. I didn't have friends in this space. Like, I was like one of the first people kind of in this space, so I'm like navigating it by myself, and then to go into it full time, like, again, it was very much an intuition thing.
You have a very, like, this is what I'm saying, everything you say, it's that you have a very strong sense of self, because even when you're like, no, like, I would just tell my parents, like, yeah, I'm quitting.
Yeah.
Because my intuition.
Yeah.
I just don't want to work out. Like, I'm like, you have a very strong sense of, like,
the intuition is the intuition is very,
you don't have like all those
strong.
doubts?
The intuition is stronger than the doubts. I have doubts.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't, but the intuition is so much stronger.
That's good. That's how it should be.
Yeah, it's so much stronger. It's such a, like, it's a feeling I can't ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish more people were in tune with their intuition. I think it's something that's like beat out of us as a kid.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to really get it is by taking those risks, like doing the things that you didn't think were going to work out, and then realizing, hey, they do work out. They're okay, they're fine. Done. Yeah, like, look how far you've gotten. Like, look at all these things that did work out, and they didn't work out by coincidence. It's because you did X, Y, Z, and it worked out. Mm-hmm. It's about, like, trusting your intuition, knowing, like, that you want this thing, and then being open to the experiences that will get you there. Mm-hmm. Because you can't also have, like, a tunnel vision and be like, this is the only way it's going to work. Like, you have to be open. Like, when you're trusting your intuition, you have to be open that the universe is going to bring it to you in any way possible.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, this is the only way it'll work, because then you'll miss opportunities.
Of course, because you didn't know you were quitting your job to become an influencer. You thought you were becoming a makeup artist.
Exactly. And so, like, these things kind of, like, start to come into play, and you have to just be open to them and open to, like, yes, like, again, it's the intuition. It's like, yes, this is guiding me in the way I need it to be, and this is where I need to go, and, like, this feels right to me. But I think a lot of people lose it when they're, like, even as, like, they lose it as a child, because especially when you come from, like, traditional parents, because there's only one right way to do things. And for me, that wasn't the case growing up. There were so many things I pushed back on, and then I was like, well, what would happen if I don't? And it worked out. And I think I, like, just built that intuition, being like, okay, no, I'm smart, like, I can figure this out.
I get what you're saying, but I also think like, if my own intuition was, let's say, 75%, the 25% was what my parents say. Yeah. So I never really had the strong enough. I did to some degree. Like, for example, I did start doing content. Yeah. But I would always be like, well, what if what they're saying is actually right, and I'm wrong? Like, I always had that doubt. And I feel like a lot of girls.
Then you can just go back.
I know, but it's almost like going against them. Like, it's almost like a sense of, like, you don't have, like, the strength or, like,
the confidence?
The confidence.
I don't think you need confidence. I think you need self-compassion. I think that's all you need in order to move forward. I think the self-compassion helps you build the confidence. Confidence is, like, ego-driven. You could be working out of a place of delusion with confidence, right? But with self-compassion, it's like you can try something out. If it doesn't work out, you can be forgiving to yourself, right? And then be like, okay, what did I learn from this? How can I move forward? What can I do better, right? Whereas if you're just confident and it doesn't work out, that's a hit to your ego, and then you feel like, okay, I can't do this at all.
It's true, yeah.
Right? And I think being able to let yourself make mistakes, let yourself grow, let yourself learn, being like, this is part of the process, that's what builds the self-confidence.
Yeah.
Versus I know this is going to happen for me, and then when it doesn't, you feel destroyed, and then you're just like, I'm never doing this
and
again.
then the thought that people that doubted you might be
it's
like, maybe
they were right. Like, oh, that's not where you're trying to go for. I think when you have self-compassion, it's easier for you to be like, it's okay that I made this mistake, it's okay that this particular thing didn't work out, but how can I make something work out? Like, what did I learn from this? And from the only way you really truly build that confidence is from making mistakes and taking those risks, and then trusting that you're smart enough to figure it out, because you always do, you know, like majority of the time you always do. And if it doesn't work out, you can go back. Like, this isn't your end all be all. Yeah, exactly. It's like operating from that place of self-compassion, and I think that's something a lot of us lack. I know I
never would have worded it like that, but I see what you're saying. You're calling it self-compassion, like, I'm not going to be hard on myself, almost.
Exactly.
If things don't work out.
Exactly. Because everything's a learning experience. And if it didn't work out, okay, but there might be another way it works out. Or, what did I learn from this? Like, how else can I take this?
But, like, I'm not judging myself.
I'm not judging myself, because I'm human. and humans make mistakes, and things don't always work out the way you want it
That's
to.
a very different approach than what your parents are telling you in your ear.
Yeah. This was something I've actually only recently learned how to put into words. It was something I think subconsciously I knew, because there was a lot of mistakes I have made in my life and that I've learned from, and then things worked out for me. So I had a lot of examples and I think a lot of people do have a lot of examples, but they put it up to chance, or they put it up to like, oh, that was a coincidence, and not actually take credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes back down to like us being like, us not celebrating ourselves enough, and like never learning to like feel gratitude towards our accomplishments and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look back at your life, there's so much shit that you've accomplished that you can be like, well, this worked out, or when things weren't working out, I did this, and now this worked out. Like,
and you can use it as evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We diverted.
I know. I was gonna say we're on a completely different subject.
I know.
I don't know where we're moving out. I was gonna say though, there's probably a lot of people who are watching this thinking like, I want to move out with my partner, or I want to move out by myself, but my parents are not accepting of it.
I mean, like, maybe that goes back to the self-confidence thing. Let's tie it back in.
Like, how do we wrap this up? No.
Yeah. It's your advice, because I feel like financial situations is also
very different. Yeah. Okay. I always recommend, like, I even said this in one of my TikToks, like, if you can move away for university, do it.
Yeah.
I've always said
100% agree.
Yeah.
100%
the life
agree
experience, the friendships, the growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's just insane. Like, I'm like, I think so. And then, like, so even if you're past university, like, if you're thinking of moving out, I highly suggest it. But of course, it's the financial aspect.
Yeah. How is it living with a roommate?
It's always been good because we've been friends.
Okay.
Like, we've always been really close friends.
Because I think that's like something people would feel like scared about, like, oh, like, what if I don't like my roommate, or I just want my own place?
Yeah. Now, the only reason I don't have my own place is financially.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like I had to compromise somewhere.
Yeah.
And
you shouldn't be afraid to compromise if that's
you can't
what
get
helps
it all.
you.
Yeah. So everyone I've lived with has been my friend, which has been good. Like, is it an adjustment? Yes, but you know what I always think, like, because I've lived with two different people in the same, like, two different roommates, I think I know I'm very flexible. Like, I actually think,
well, you
like,
have to be at that point, right? Like, you have to, like, learn how to
compromise. Because people are completely different. That I always think, like, when I have a partner, oh, I'm gonna be like a breeze. Like, I'm not gonna be like, I feel like because
yes and no. Yes and
yeah,
no.
maybe. I don't know, because I've never lived with somebody like a man, but I feel like I've become like more flexible and tolerant.
I agree with that, because that also happened to me when I went away to university. I definitely, like, you have to figure out your battles kind of thing, and
understand,
learn
like,
how to, like, work around certain things when you're living with someone.
I think if you can financially afford to at least even have, like, a little growth period, like, I know people who will, like, go to, like, New York for a summer by themselves.
Yeah.
I had a friend who lives in Van. She just, like, got an Airbnb for a summer in Toronto.
Months, yeah.
And that was, like, a lot of growth even in a couple months. If you can afford it, I say do it.
Yeah. I agree with
like,
that.
don't run yourself dry and like be in debt, but like, I highly recommend, just because of the growth and the life experience.
Yeah. I think I want to end off this video by talking about giving a little bit of advice from the perspective of someone that's moved out on their own and single. Like, what's your best advice? And then I'll share my perspective of my best advice about moving out with a partner before marriage.
I'm like, there's so many different things. One, I feel like you're gonna say the same point. Do it for the right reasons.
Yes.
Don't just do it like because you just want to escape your parents. Like,
yeah.
I want to go as far away as I can. Like, do it for the right reasons. Don't do it to wild out. Like, truly, like, I get it. Like, you want your freedom, but like, that's not why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Like, do it because you want to grow. Do it because maybe you think it's a better environment for you. Like, that's what I felt. Like, I didn't think I think it was too toxic to go home. Look into, like, finances. Like, if you have to compromise. Like, don't have unrealistic expectations. Understand that it's never perfect. Like, living at home is never perfect.
Yeah.
Living with a roommate is never perfect, and living even on your own will also have its downfalls.
And you don't necessarily need to, like, move into the city. Maybe move where it's
outskirts,
more financially affordable for you.
Yeah, and I think in terms of talking to your parents about it, I think you have to just kind of come to terms that it's not. I don't think there's any brown parent who's going to be like, very enthusiastic.
Yeah, especially if you come from traditional parents.
No.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not moving too far away. Maybe it's just for a certain amount of time. Maybe it's letting them have more, communicating with them more. Like, maybe they're going to be worried about you. Like, mine, for example, have my location because they're just safety-wise. Which that's something I was like, you know what? I get it. Like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I think just, like, understand where your parents are coming from.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, how to go about it. And know that it's going to be a challenge, but I think give them the reassurance that they need so that when you do move out, they're not feeling like you just left.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like 100% on that point, because communicating this to your parents is probably the hardest part, or like one of the big reasons besides financially why people will stay and not move out, because their parents won't allow them. And one thing that I told my parents, I think that made a really big difference, was I need you to trust that you raised me well enough that I know how to make good decisions. And you know, like, you need to trust your own parenting skills, because you raised me to be a good person and I will be okay on my own. And there are certain things in life that I can't always rely on you. Like, I'm turning into an adult now. Like, I can't always like rely on you and expect you to like fix all my mistakes or, you know, solve all my problems. There are certain things that you can, that part of your life you can really only learn when you're on your own. Like you said, like the compromise, like, yeah, maybe that you share your location, maybe you call them more often, maybe you go see them on weekends. Like, when I first moved out, that was something I did pretty often. I would go see them on weekends, because I know it was also a hard transition for them. Like, it feels like you're losing like a kid, right? That's also like, I think from a parent's perspective, is mentally a lot to take in. So yeah, that for me, another piece of advice is, if you are moving out with a partner, I highly recommend doing it before marriage, because living with someone and dating them are like
completely different.
So different. They're so different, and it's not always a bad thing. It's just like you said, it takes some time to adjust to each other when you're living with someone else. You know, just learning their quirks, how they grew up, all that stuff. And so there might be things that you may not agree with, and it's just kind of good to know those things in advance and know that, hey, is this someone I can actually like work with, grow with, compromise with? Like, can we actually work together in order to build a life? And living together helps you discover that before you go into something as serious as a marriage. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining us. You can find Neeti where?
On YouTube, Neeti Sharma, and then my Instagram is Neeti.Sharma, and TikTok's Neeti Sharma.
I'll link all of her socials below anyways, so you guys don't have to memorize that. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do not forget to like, comment, subscribe. Also share it with someone that might need to see it. If there's a topic you want me to cover in the next video, let me know. And if you like this style of video, because normally I know I do get ready with me's, but if you like this kind of like podcast, interview, talking type of style video, let me know. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!